In come Pablo Escobar, wearing khaki pants, nice shine shoes, a plaid shirt, shook my hand warmly, and asked about the same thing that Jorge had asked, but he asked in Spanish, and I speak enough Spanish I could talk to him. So I said, well, how often do you want me to come? He said, we'll be waiting on you, senor. But he is the biggest snitch in the history of drug running. My name's Barry Seal. How you do?
I'm not a drug smuggler. I say prove it.
Friend, they're going to kill you.
So that was
just as fast as you want to go.
Yeah.
So I went and got my airplane, and I went and I did a load, and I did 7 loads. And so I got above the clouds, the fog and clouds, and I couldn't get down in New Orleans. And it was fogged in from Texas to New York. So I had no choice. The runways were all closed, and I couldn't get in. So I came down the glide slope blind, and I landed and bounced down that runway with zero visibility.
Wow.
And stopped there all night long. And I was nervous. When the next morning about 8 o'clock I could see the sun, and I had an hour or so fuel left. But I was afraid some little truck would come down there. That was a life sentence, 500 kilos of cocaine sitting on the runway, right in an international runway. Plus I didn't know but some jet would come down on those blind landing. So I took off, and I went over and landed it where I was supposed to land. It was difficult. And I said, I'm hanging it up. I'm not going to do it anymore. Please, the Colombians down there, they were making a living off of me. Come on, don't you know anybody? And I said, you know I do. So I had been on an airplane. I was looking for a ranch to refuel in Honduras, about halfway up on Hauling Pot. So my wife and the 2 little children went down, and we stayed a week out there looking at a ranch. A beautiful river, and it's not a good spot for a runway, though. And we came back, and all our clothes were muddy and dirty, and we put them in a laundry. The guy, they'll be ready tomorrow, but they weren't ready tomorrow. But we had made reservations to fly back to New Orleans from Honduras. So I told my wife, you go into the airport, and I'll go get the clothes. And if I don't make it, it's easier for 1 to get on standby than 5. So she said, okay. So she went on to the airport, and I got the clothes, and I got an old taxi, and I paid him $100. I said, go faster, and he just blew the horn faster, and everybody passed us. And we got to the airport, and the plane, brand new 727, was pulling out off the tarmac. And I ran around with all those clothes on my back, and I'm waving, and the pilot, the young fellow, he waves back. And so then I see Mari's face in the cockpit. That time you could walk right up there. And the nose wheel, he put on brakes, and it went down, and he laughed, and he put the air stair door out for me.
Yeah.
When he got almost to the ground, he took off again, just like a hitchhiker. You know how they play with you.
Play with you.
And so I laughed, and then he stopped, and I let the stair out all the way, and I got on. And when I did, the whole crowd, the 130 people, they gave me a big hand. And I went on back 10 or 15 rows, and my daughter was sitting on the aisle, and there was a stout man. He looked like a CIA or agent or something, a diplomat, clear blue eyes, sparkling. I thought, uh-oh, wonder what he's doing here. And the plane took off, zoom, and then he pulled his wheels up, and it plump, and then it got up about 5,000 feet, and it had another click, click. And Miriam said, what was that, Dad? I said, he just turned on his autopilot. And the guy said, you fly these things? I said, I got a few hours, mister. Well, my name's Barry Seal. How you do?
Barry Siegel?
Barry
From
Seal.
American Made?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he told me he just got out of prison that morning. I thought, bullshit, you just trying to get me to talk. You a DEA agent or FBI or something. You're not out of prison this morning, dressed nice, look nice. And so he's telling me about his airplanes and how he used to fly with TWA. He was the youngest captain ever. He just chattered away. He was a good chatter. I didn't believe a word he said.
Yeah, you thought it was the feds.
Yeah, he thought he was after me.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you get that seat where I'm going to sit?
Yeah.
So we got off the plane in New Orleans, and there was his mother and his wife and children and cousins and uncles, and hugging and kissing and laughing and just crying. I said, he's telling the truth. He did just get out of prison. So I told my wife to write our name and address down. She's got a pretty handwriting. And I went over. I said, Barry, I may have some work for you. Come out to California. So a few days later, he flew out. Let's go for a flight. And I said, show me what you can do. And I wish I hadn't told him that. He about made me puke. When it was time to finish, he cut the engines and let it go stall from side to side. There's a aerobatic man, Bob Hoover, that does that at the end of his air shows. And that's the only time I'd ever seen it. And I rode down on a sideways stall and stopped. I thought, you can fly for me, buddy. He said, well, I'm only going to land in Mena, Arkansas.
Small
Air Base at Mena, Arkansas, and they brought in plane load after plane load of cocaine there.
So he paid a certain gentleman there $50,000 every time the wheels touched the ground. Of course, I had to pay it.
Wow.
And I paid Barry $1 million every time he flew. So, yeah, he'd fly just as fast as I'd pay him. He did 30 loads for me. And then I went to prison for an old pot charge.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So did he
years.
keep working for Mr. Escobar?
He forgot about me. Same as he did. But he helped my wife. He paid for the airplanes. I think he had 4 of my Panthers.
Wow.
And so he paid her every penny of it and helped her out, sending the best lawyer, Albert
While you were
Krieger.
incarcerated.
He sent a lawyer in for me. So I think the lawyer, make sure I wasn't talking.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, the cartel used to do that with me. They would send lawyers in just to make sure we're not talking about them. You know, it'd find out it's cartel lawyers.
Yeah, he didn't pay for the lawyer, but he
would send people in.
Me off.
He used to smuggle drugs, and he got caught, and he became one of the government's most valuable informants in the war against cocaine. But last night in Louisiana, Barry Seal's enemies caught up with him.
I did 2 years in prison for the pot, and I got out. And I'd heard Barry might be turned sideways, or upside down, as you want to call it. So I just got out of prison, and I saw, I was having breakfast. There was Ronald Reagan's blue eyes. Reagan says, we have absolute proof that the communist Sandinista government is in the cocaine running business.
Top Nicaraguan government officials are deeply involved in drug trafficking.
A few minutes later, the phone rang, and Barry said, I'm coming out tonight, Roger. He said, meet me at this French restaurant there in Santa Barbara. So I came in about 9 o'clock, and Barry was sitting in the back. There were about 20 people in there, all of them about 40 years old, loaded up. You know, you could see under the latest shirts and the skirts and
Those feds.
Oh, shit. I knew it.
You knew right away, huh?
Of course, I knew it before I got there. But then you just saw it. It was right pretty, all them nice-looking people, you know, in there with their guns hid.
Yeah.
I went up to Barry. I said, Barry, are you wired? He said, no, I'm not. I said, well, I'm not going to say anything, Barry. Will you just tell me what's going on? The Barry just sat there and cried. He said, Roger, I just couldn't do 3 life sentences. And he put his hands up over his face, and he got fat, and the tears ran between his fingers. He said, I just couldn't do it. So I've told on you, I've told on Maury, I've told on everybody I know, my mother. I just can't do 3 life sentences. And they give him a DEA agent named Jake Jacobson. I said, well, bring him over. So the agent says, you can come tomorrow with your wife first class, or I'll take you down tonight in chains. But you got to testify before a federal grand jury.
Against Escobar.
Against Escobar and Ocho and everything you know. And
they wanted Medellin.
They wanted the whole thing. It says, and you and Barry will be you're going to have to say what Barry said. So I said, I'll go first class. So I took Maury and I went down the next day, and I went to the lawyer. And I went in to see him, and he was on a treadmill. He was supposed to be the best in the state. And when I got through to him, he said, well, I'll represent you, but I don't talk to snitches. I said, well, I'm not a snitch, sir. He said, well, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're not telling on the cartel, are we?
Well, I said, I thought you're smart enough to help me do something.
Yeah.
I'm in a mess. He said, I'll represent you for $600,000. But again, I don't talk to snitches. So I took Maury and the children. I fled to Brazil. And it was down there for just a little while. And that night I met Barry in the La Festival restaurant. And him and Debbie came in. She was looking good. And we had desserts together. And at the end of it, I gave him a hug. I said, friend, they're going to kill you. Oh, no, Fabio's in jail and this and that and other. And I said, friend, they're going to kill you.
He didn't believe you.
He wouldn't believe it. So I went to Brazil and called Colombia. I have great news, good news, good news, good news. Barry Seal is dead. And I cried. And I went and told Maury and Miriam, and they cried too. Barry was my friend, but he is the biggest snitch in the history of drug running. So they had no case against me. So when they caught me, they made me do 11 years in a maximum security prison for a parole violation.
Wow. Back in the U.S.
In the United States, yes.
Where was that time at?
Lompoc Penitentiary.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was there in 2017 to 2020.
I was there a couple of decades ahead of you.
Wow. So we were in the same prison.
Yeah,
just different eras.
Yeah.
Where are we at today?
Where we at today?
What are we doing?
I'm telling you what, I don't know. I'm confused. When I get on the ground, I don't know my way around. Up in the air, I can find out. Hey there, ain't you pretty? Look at that.
Nice
Good to
to see
see
you,
you.
man.
Likewise.
Roger, so a little recap is you go to prison for 11 years on a violation, and you get out around 98. Tell me what happens then.
You know what happened then. I wound up the same place you wound up.
Australia.
Yeah, absolutely, down under. I got arrested, about that Barry Seal stuff, and I fled to Brazil, and I fled to Europe. But I had bought a ship, and it had a captain on it. And he was a port jolly fella. And so I said, would you like to haul some hashish? And how much you pay? I said, I'll pay you $400,000 a trip. Hell yeah, I want to haul some hash. So he did a trip from Morocco to England, unloaded 3.5 tons. Everything went well, and he went back to Portugal and parked the boat. And I met him in Amsterdam and gave him $400,000. Well, he went back to Germany, and he bought him a long BMW and a long cigar. And he was bragging. He just thought he had a license. And the police came and they found the $400,000, and they said, if you'll tell us who give you this, you'll be home by Christmas. It was a 3-slap confession. They slapped him once to get him started and slapped him twice to shut him up. He told them everything. So anyhow, they took the money and they said, you'll be home by Christmas. They didn't tell him which Christmas. He got 7 years for something they had absolutely not one shred of proof.
Wow.
So they arrested me in Spain. I escaped in the courthouse, and then they kept me there 1.5 years, and they extradited me to Germany. And after 1 year, I escaped from the German prison, and that was a real big escape. So I went back to Colombia. I need to make some money. I'm broke. So they says, all right, would you take a load to Australia? That's a long way. I bought a 45-foot sailboat, and I got it all fixed up to go. And I asked her how much you pay, and they said they'll pay me like, I don't know, $2,000 a kilo, so whatever it was $20 million to haul the load down there. Sure, I hauled it down there. So I got the boat ready to go, and then I said, can you supply me off the coast of Brazil or Argentina? Why? I said, something could break. I mean, it's a sailboat. You can bring me some fresh vegetables, some fruit. I'll be sailing it by myself. What? It might break? I said, yeah, it might break, and no telling what's going to happen on a sailboat on that long a trip. Oh, no. What wouldn't break? The only thing I can think of is those offshore supply vessels. Oh, how much will one of those cost? I said, $500,000. Okay, here's $500,000. Take it. So I left my boat, and boy, that thing was big. I'd never been on something like that before.
I was bringing in, 20, 30 kilos at a time, and at one point we took a sailboat. We were trying to get down there from Ensenada, right? And it was a little 50-foot sailboat that I got to Newport Beach, and it had a clavo, a stash spot with 80 kilos. How many kilos did you have on your boat, and what was the size of the boat?
There was 1,000 kilos, 130-footer.
So about as big as this boat.
Yeah, and 30 feet more added to it. So.
Wow, that's a big boat.
And it was big, but it didn't take me long till I had it. So I took off, and I got my brother-in-law, Joel Parrish, to come along with me. Went off of the coast of Senegal and refueled, and a boat was supposed to meet us there. And a Colombian guy got on, and he talking on the radio. Nope, you got to go back towards Colombia 1,000 miles. Well, this thing burns fuel,
Yeah, it's not cheap.
We went back, and we was circling up and down under the satellite. I didn't like that. And then it got rough. And the Colombian says, so you know where we go? And he said, yes, says, a man's coming, and he's a deep sea diver. In case we have to throw it overboard, he's a deep sea diver, and he's really smart. He just got out of a 5-ton deal in California. I said, oh, he just got out of a 5-ton deal in California? You're just telling me now?
Yeah, that's not good.
I thought, you bunch of idiots.
Yeah,
you think I'm going to meet a man that just got a
out.
5-ton deal? No, thank you. So I turned the boat, and he had a satellite telephone, first one I'd ever seen. And so I took this card out of my phone and put it in there so he couldn't talk anymore.
What year was this?
2000.
Wow, okay.
So, boy, I went a long way from where I was supposed to go. And I went to a place called Shark's Bay. Nobody knew we was coming. And we left the big boat out, and me and the Colombian got in 2 20-foot Zodiacs. So I went on out to the big boat, and we cut a big hole in the side of it, and I reversed all the pumps and set it on a westerly heading. And it went, I believe, 26 miles before it sunk. And we sitting there in the morning, and we can't go because there's fishermen there. And so it's raining. We get up under some rocks, and all of a sudden, they raise up out of the ground just like mushrooms. it was human beings. No. The TRG, they call them. Down, 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 you sons of bitches. They want to know how many people on the boat. I said, there's 12 of them on there. Are they drowned yet? He smacked me upside the head. They didn't like what I said.
Yeah.
So they found out who I was with Interpol. They put me in something like a Brinks truck.
Yeah.
And drove me across town and backed into the most secure prison in the Southern Hemisphere, Casuarina Prison.
Roger is serving out his days in Casuarina for importing $250 million worth of cocaine.
And they backed up through 13 gates. You could hear them call gates and numbers, and they put me in a thing called the SHU, special housing.
Yeah, special
and
housing.
It was just exactly like the Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And I got they was looking at me through one-way mirrors, 5 or 6 of the men, and I was in there for a year, and I got a 25-year sentence. And I testified for my brother-in-law, and he got off. So he got off and went home, and the prosecution appealed my sentence and raised me to life in prison.
Wow.
So I had to do 18 years before I could apply for parole. I said, I got life. I may not ever get it here, and I escaped from a German prison. I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So I said I better tell some of these tales to my children and grandchildren. So I wrote a book.
The Smuggler.
Smuggler, yeah, the book Smuggler.
So you wrote the book The Smuggler. I wrote the book The California Kid in Prison. That's crazy. We have some parallel stories, my friend.
Absolutely, we do. After 18 years, I wrote to my neighbor, Jimmy Carter.
The president?
Yes, president. He wasn't president anymore. He's an old man. And I told him who I was, and he remembered. So he wrote a letter to the Attorney General of Australia and said, if appropriate, I'd appreciate you considering my neighbor, Roger Reaves, for parole. And I got parole on my date, end of 18, which is rare for a life sentence.
Very rare.
Because I was in with 300 people. All of them was murderers but me.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing is my wife waited for me all those years.
That's a good wife.
Even her parents said, why don't you divorce him? He's serving life.
Yeah.
He may never come home. And she said, well, I love him, Dad. I can't do that.
Yeah, that's a good woman.
It sure was.
Yeah.
I said, how did you do it? She said, we say the blessing, we hold the hands with the children around the table. And she said, I just couldn't imagine another man sitting there doing that.
That's a good woman. You got to keep her.
It certainly is. Salute to Mari.
Salute to her.
Yeah.
Roger, well, thanks again, man. I look forward to filming some new content with you again, and more importantly, a new friendship.
I need some new friendship.
And maybe one day we'll plan a trip with your flying and maybe my protein ice cream. I might have you handle the logistics for me.
Ooh, I'm like Pancho Villa.
That's right.
I have 3 passions.
That's right.
Women, ice cream, and war, in that order.
That's right.
We have the time, we have the seals, we have the pack.
So I'm giving away my free book this week. This one's from Mark. Thanks for protecting kingpins like myself. Hope you enjoy my story, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in the near future. I wrote this in my 6x8 prison cell while I was at my lowest point of life. But as a Trojan, I learned to fight on. Your favorite convict, Owen Hansen, number 88, a.k.a. the California Kid. Thank you, Mark.